Hello and welcome to Outlook's The Outlier, the show where we get top names from the fields of politics, bureaucracy, academics, economics, industry, sports, science, music, literature, the arts, and so on for an informal but an intelligent conversation. Our outlier this week is the CEO of NITI Aayog, Amitabh Kant. Amitabh Kant and his organization have been instrumental in advising the government in the two most important crises that the country is going through right now, the coronavirus pandemic and the economic downtrend. So his organization gives advice, gives inputs to the government for the various steps that they take, how to mitigate the pandemic and how to get the economy back on tracks. All the major decisions that the government has taken so far, the lockdown, the easing up of the lockdown, the preparing the hospitals for COVID-19, the economic stimulus package, the special package for MSME sector, for agriculture, all these major decisions have got NITI Aayog's inputs, which Mr. Kant and his team, with consultation with various experts, come up and advise the government. Thank you very much, Mr. Kant, for joining the Outlier. I know you and your team have been working 24/7 the last few months, and how difficult it must have been to take some time out.
Yeah, well, it's been a tough period. It's been very challenging. But I'm delighted to interact with you and give you a perspective of what's happening. So I look forward.
Is this, would you say this is the toughest assignment of your career so far?
No, I've had pretty tough assignments, both in Kerala and in Delhi, but this period is definitely the toughest. And this is a challenge for all of us in government. It's also a challenge for the country, as much as it is a challenge for every single administrator across the country.
Now it's been about 3 months of the lockdown and we are slowly easing up now. It now comes to light that about less than 20 cities are actually responsible for more than 75% of the cases in India. Looking back at the lockdown, would you say it was a bit too severe? The rest of the country also suffered because of these 20 odd cities?
Well, I don't think so, because the decision of the government to go into a lockdown, if you look at various health experts, they've all appreciated it. And I would like you to understand that when we did this initiative, when the government initiated the lockdown, not much was known about how the virus would spread in India. However, we did know how rapidly it was spiking in other countries, particularly the European countries. And, if we had not taken that risk, simply assuming at that start that the virus would have had a very different impact in India and waited further before we went into a lockdown, that would not have been the correct strategy. It might actually have proved to be a very, very risky move, and it may have had a very severe impact. For context, the pre-lockdown doubling rate was about 3.2. This essentially implies that you potentially would have hit 10 lakh cases on 25th April in the absence of a lockdown. This implies that if we never had the lockdown, we would have had roughly about twice the number of cases that we have now 2 months ago. So 2 months ago, we would have had twice the number of cases. And in that sense, I would like to reiterate that initiating a lockdown at an early stage was a good move. During the lockdown, the government was constantly attentive to the needs of the economy, and the unlocking mechanism in terms of gradual easing of restrictions actually started after the lockdown one itself. Different ministries and different empowered groups were constantly attentive to the needs of the citizens and industries, and notifications were actually continuously being put out in the public domain and guidelines were constantly being revised in the lockdown one itself. Ultimately, we have to understand that a lockdown cannot be a permanent solution. It is
Yes.
only a maneuver to delay the exponential rise of the virus and to prepare ourselves for adequate number of hospital beds, PPE, etc. It is a measure only to depress the peak to prevent our health infrastructure from collapsing and to arrest an early and rapid spread of cases. It has to be followed up with measures, such as masking, social distancing, and stringent guidelines for operation, be it public markets or industries. And I
Mhm.
would only like to say that we are not the only ones who have been hit. All countries across the globe have been hit. The priority is to move forward, keeping both lives and livelihood and the economy as our key priorities. And actually, I'm quite confident that the measures that have been taken by the government, as well as the huge amount of resilience, adaptability, and innovation and initiative shown by the private sector and by the citizens, we will bounce back in a big way.
Did you anticipate, the migrant workers issue to blow up to such proportions? Would you now, in hindsight, say that maybe better coordination between the center and the states, maybe better coordination between the states themselves could have mitigated, the heart-rending scenes that we saw?
You see, looking back, I would say that the natural instinct of people during such a situation is to head towards their homes, villages, and of course, in a country as large as India, this number is huge because over a period of time, because of the existing labor laws, we built up a very big force over about 500, big number of informal workers, and therefore the crux is really to get our labor laws right in the long run. But however, given the sheer magnitude of the migrant force traveling back, uh, one thing which the center tried to do was to provide SDRF funds, the disaster relief funds, and permitted the states to provide shelter and home to the state governments to all the migrant workers. And actually, the central government released about 11,000 crores to the state governments. And in such a challenging time, the central government is actually quite far removed from the ground. The district administration, the municipal administration, the states have to take immediate action, because we must realize that India is bigger than 25 countries of Europe, and actually this bit of governance is totally a function of district and of states. And center, through its release of guidelines of SDRF, releasing 11,000 crores in advance, giving out 40,000 crores for Manrega work, had, it did its work. But, and my only feeling is, looking back, that the district administrations, the municipal administration, the states could have acted much quicker, much faster. And almost about 60 lakh migrants took taken about 4,500 trains to reach back to the villages. This has been a monumental exercise. The states have, in several places put up large institutional quarantine centers for returning workers, because the challenge was a human challenge. Here was a set of contract workers wanting to go back. And on the other side, the human challenge was that states were not wanting them to come back. The villages were not wanting them to come back. The districts were not wanting to come back, because there was a fear that the virus would spread. And therefore, at that particular point of time, the challenge for the country was to ensure that the virus doesn't move from urban areas to rural areas. And, in rural communities, there was a big challenge of trying to control that. And therefore, to contain the spread of the virus upon returning to their villages has been a big challenge. Now, in addition to the government, I think the railways, police, paramilitaries, all have provided food on a large scale. I've been heading the Empowered Group number 6, and I've worked with over 92,000 NGOs and civil society organizations, and many of them have worked day in, day out, and are working to ensure that no one sleeps on an empty stomach. And huge amount of work has been done by NGOs and civil society. So my view is that relaxations have now been eased. This will lead to a resumption of economic activity for those remaining behind in villages. Manrega activity has picked up in a big way, and on the other side, industries are requiring workers. So I think it'll take a little time, but the resumption will pick up pace, and the migration back will in due course take place. I'm quite sure that this will happen.
In fact, going back to those days, like when say a lot of people wanted to go from Maharashtra or Delhi back to UP and Bihar, as you said, this confusion, the state not wanting them, buses, some rumors of buses being there, not being there, the people landing up at the bus stops and not being able to reach. So all these things, don't you think I mean the center could have intervened and eased the situation a little bit, maybe talk to the states, advise them a little bit?
No, center actually did a lot of talking. Center actually worked a lot with the states. It released the SDRF funds. It provided allocations for Manrega. Many things were done. But there were several challenges. The country had not seen a movement of this nature. And my personal view is that states and district administrations could have worked much quicker, much faster on this, because the center is very far removed from the ground reality. The center is a policy making body, but the states and districts are at the grassroots level. So every state could have reacted. But I want to stress one point, and which is very critical. We must realize that actually the root of this problem is our existing labor laws, and we need to set them right. Without that, it will be very difficult to fight. These crises will arise on a later date again till we do not set our antiquated labor laws right.
In fact, I had a question on labor laws. Some of the states, though it was, some of the states have enacted reforms in labor
Hmm.
laws,
Hmm.
like Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. But the trade unions and many experts feel that the laws are only to hire and fire quicker. And
Hmm.
do you think, I mean, this is going to will this build any confidence among the laborers to get back to the work if they know that actually the firing is going to be even easier?
My view is that the crux is that we need to bring in long-term reforms in our labor laws, and uh, if we have to, essentially, instead of having informal workers, we need formal workers in our industries, and they need to be provided both shelter at the place where they work, and they need to
Correct.
be provided adequate, security. We have to
And
understand the crux of the problem is that laws which were enacted to protect the workers were actually the reasons for pushing them into the informal workers. And India's, the previous regime of multiple and complex labor laws were one of the major factors which discouraged large scale manufacturing in India. And this actually created a huge vested interest through contract workers to create informality of work. And despite labor laws being heavily weighed in favor of labor, it has led to a situation where about almost 85% of our workforce was informal. And
right.
therefore, it's not covered by laws that were enacted to protect their rights in the first place. So you need labor laws which actually protect all the workers and do not protect only the unions and a few workers. Therefore, we must recognize that the existing system actually fell far short of the benefits it intended
Yes.
to accrue. And the labor codes being discussed in the parliament are addressing some of these shortcomings of our very archaic labor laws. They will
It,
balance the needs of both
it,
employers and employees. And also now in this phase of economic recovery, we have to focus on improving the quality of our production and integrating ourselves into the global value chain. And therefore, the old labor laws hardly encouraged quality manufacturing, with only informality being encouraged. And my view is that labor laws alone, huge stress, like we are being reformed,
Yeah.
agriculture sector, we reformed coal mining. Labor laws are most antiquated in this, and therefore, if we have to get into global quality standards, and manufacturing process has to be made more efficient, innovative, and technical friendly, labor laws will play a critical role. And it is a combination of labor and capital that will result in an overall improvement of quality.
That is, I completely agree. It is a real shame that a country should have 85 to 90% informal labor. I mean, which basically means there is no insurance, there is no health security, there is no shelter, there is no housing, there is no education, isn't it? I mean, but sir, this if this labor does come into the formal sector, doesn't the burden then fall on the government, the states to provide all this?
No, it falls, actually, it will squarely fall, the burden for that, if you are able to bring in formality, will fall on the industry which will provide the work. I mean, look at the classic case of our industrial in automobile sector, where everybody is today taking informal workers. Why
On
should they?
contract.
Why should they not provide shelter for these workers? Everywhere in every part of the world, they provide shelter. But it's the labor laws,
Absolutely.
which say that you are not able to, once you cross the limit of 100, you are not able to hire, you're not able to fire, you're not able to close down. The fear of that is actually driving informality. And then you push them through totally through the ESIC mechanism, which is very burdensome, and EPFO. So all these need to be made simpler, and the inspector Raj increases. All this, we've suggested a whole range of reforms which are being considered by the parliament now, and parliament needs to quickly pass them. So the root of the problem we need to address. Instead of blaming center or state, I think the root of the problem is we've created labor laws which have created migrant workers and informal workers, and which have caused extreme misery to us.
Absolutely. In fact, if this pandemic brings about these changes, and as you said that, say, for instance, in the automobile sector, if more and more people are not on this contract but actually on roll, it would be a great positive.
Yeah. So my view is that this is a huge opportunity to bring radical reforms in India, and as the Prime
Okay.
Minister has said, he's pushed for reforms in several areas. He's pushed for reforms in agriculture. He's pushed for reforms in coal. He's pushed for reforms in mining. He's pushed for MSME. The reform for definition of MSME, which is pending for inordinately for last 17 years. So if we are able to get our reforms right in some of these sectors and the labor laws, I think we'll be poised for a big growth in the coming years. What we need to learn is from other countries. How did they drive growth post World War II? How did Japan drive growth for such a long period? How did Korea? How did Taiwan? And later
Right.
China? They drove growth through all this, through reforms. And therefore, we need to do this. This is critical.
Labor reforms is one. Now it is quite clear that, according to many studies, even that the GDP growth, I mean, the economic growth is going to be not very high. It's kind of, I mean, it will be quite nominal. I mean, many experts say 1 to 2%. What do you think on the ground? What does it mean, as in terms of jobs? And when do you think we can get back to business as usual?
No, so there are challenges, and these are challenges. It's not that growth is going to slow down in India. There's going to be a slowdown of growth across the world, as the IMF has said. Uh, the global economic activity will be muted for at least, to my mind, at least 6 to 8 months this year. Therefore, the ripple effects of the global economy will be felt in the Indian economy also for the next 6 months. Uh, I, To my mind, however, the advantage for India is that nearly 60% of our GDP comes from domestic consumption, and there are already signs of green shoots in the domestic economic activity. If I go by what the railways is saying, and according to them, reverse migration of labor has actually already started from labor surplus regions of UP Bihar. And this is
Mhm.
a good indication of the revival of domestic supply chains. And secondly, I think the monsoon this year has been predicted to be normal. And this is a great sign for the Indian and the rural economy. And since a large part of the Indian population is dependent on the agriculture sector and rural demand plays a very, very significant role in domestic consumption, this will be a very positive sign for the Indian economy. Thirdly, I think the cost-cutting measures undertaken by firms in many of the developed nations is providing enhanced opportunity for Indian IT and ITS sector. And
Mhm.
the positive signals so far indicate that the business is usual scenario is, to my mind, not too far. We should work. We are all working towards it, and because of this year, the thrust will really for growth will come from the rural area, and therefore a complete functioning of the economy, to my mind, will start at a maximum in another 3 to 4 months if we don't have a second wave of the viral
So
infection.
that, that is very positive coming from you. 2 to 3 months doesn't seem that long.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months, I said.
3 to 4 months. Okay,
Yeah,
that is a very positive answer. Actually, I mean that should give a lot of hope to a lot of industry as well as workers.
yeah. This is
Sure.
my view that we should, now that we have opened up, we need to be extremely responsible as far as masking, social distancing, as far as isolation is concerned. Every district needs to be well prepared, but we have to learn to live with the virus now. And therefore, we need to, as individuals, we need to prepare ourselves to face this. And economic activities need to go on simultaneously.
Mr. Kant, the other issue is, after this Galwan attack at the LAC, there is this anti-China sentiment here in India. People are boycotting Chinese-made products, etc. But is it really realistic and practical to snap ties with China? We have such a lot of trade with them. In areas like medical equipment, in new power plants, we are quite dependent on them. How wise is it to go on this boycott Chinese products line?
So let me first say that there is a very, very strong anti-China sentiment, not merely in India, but across the world. And this has led to, and this has been on for quite some time. And I'm not looking at what has happened at our borders, but it's been on for some time, and it has led to huge discussion across the world on various strategies to reorient and reduce their exposure to a single supply chain, and that is China. And one of the strategy which was being talked before this by other countries in the world was to look at China plus one. So all companies across the world were looking at a China plus one strategy. And we have to understand that the process of globalization has been going on for centuries, and reversing this trend actually may take time and effort. However, it is not impossible. Global supply chain will get disrupted. They got disrupted because of COVID-19, and people will look for alternative supply chains. And secondly, I would say yes, India has a wide trade imbalance with China. But if we look closely, the trade imbalance arises predominantly out of five sectors. Firstly, electronics. Secondly, machinery. Thirdly, organic chemicals. Fourthly, plastics and fertilizers. These are the five sectors. Now, four out of the five sectors, except machinery, are predominantly low value products. These are either intermediate goods or low value consumer goods, which can be easily manufactured in India. The
Okay.
technology, the technology needed to manufacture these products already exists in India, and China derives cost advantage in these goods mainly through the size and scale effects. And therefore, the government of India has now come up with a number of schemes to address these very issues. And in the electronics sector, we've come out with quite a few schemes. The Modified Electronics Manufacturing Cluster Scheme, the Scheme for Promotion of Manufacturing of Electronic Components and Semiconductors Specs, and the Production Linked Incentive Scheme for Electronics and Mobile Manufacturing. They've all been announced. They were approved by the cabinet and all been announced. And taken together, all these three schemes cover a wide spectrum of very high value and low value electrical and electronic products, and they are designed to attract investments across the whole of the electronics and electrical industry value chain. It is
Okay.
expected, we expect that the investments in infrastructure that the EMC 2.0 scheme, that is the Electronic Manufacturing Cluster Scheme, is planning will incentivize setting up of large production plants in India. Some of them, like Apple and Samsung, were partly doing manufacturing, but this will lead to a big shift. And given the large coverage of all the three schemes, we are expecting that India will become a major manufacturer of electronics, and the positive spillover of this will be felt in the plastic and machinery sectors as well. And this should reduce our import dependence on China, and also make India a major exporter of electronics in the future. I also want to tell you that for organic chemicals, India is currently a huge importer of APIs from China, that is active pharmaceutical ingredients. In fact, we in India consume 15% of our overall China's exports of organic chemicals. And these are APIs, and they are a critical input into our US dollar 36 billion Indian pharma industry. And to create domestic manufacturing capacity within India, the government has actually just announced a production linked incentive scheme for this sector. And in the next few years, India's domestic manufacturing capacity, I expect, in the API sector will go up, and our dependence on China will reduce. But I also want to say that if you want to break this dependence in India, we need introduction of labor reforms. We need greater ease of doing business reforms, along with these schemes, with the intention of strengthening and reforming our domestic industry. We need size and scale. We need quick decision making. And we need to create a very strong domestic manufacturing sector, because this is critical. And only with this, labor reforms, ease of doing business, size and scale, domestic manufacturing, from a medium term point of view, India could definitely reduce its trade balance with China.
So, okay, so you think, these images of people burning Chinese products and breaking TVs made in China needn't frighten us that much?
No, they shouldn't frighten us at all. We should work towards making ourselves more and more efficient, more and more large-scale manufacturer. We should see what are the intermediate goods on which we have made ourselves dependent. We should have a single-minded pursuit of growth. We should have a single-minded pursuit of reforms, and we should have a single-minded pursuit of becoming global champions in 10 to 12 identified areas.
Mr. Kant, related to this is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's thrust on Atmanirbharta, self-reliance, as he spoke recently. From the 90s, 91, 92, when the economic reforms took place, the whole thrust was actually to globalize, to integrate with the world economy and to take part in the trade. Now, after 30 years of going down that road, how is it possible to turn back? I mean, how is it now possible to make everything ourselves, be dependent on the domestic market more? Isn't it a complete reversal of what we have been doing for so many years?
No, so Atmanirbhar is not based on the idea of isolationism or return of socialism, nor is it anti-globalization as you are making it out to be. It is in fact the opposite. Atmanirbhar Bharat is about globalization with domestic production. That you use the domestic base as a springboard to penetrate global markets. That is what Atmanirbhar Bharat is all about. And under the Atmanirbhar Bharat vision set by the Prime Minister, the domestic industry, what is he talking about? He's talking about a vocal for local and being global also. So he's saying that you reform the domestic industry, make it competitive. This will lead to more exports and enhanced globalization and not deglobalize. I think this is you've understood it wrongly. It is about enhanced globalization. But it's important to understand that it's very difficult to penetrate global markets if you don't penetrate domestic markets. And the way to achieve this is by concentrating on our domestic strengths and leveraging it in the global trade arena. This is what every successful country in the world has done in the last 75 years. You know, if you look back at the history of all these countries, they made themselves domestically competitive and then penetrated global markets. India has a huge strength on its domestic market. We must capitalize on that. But Indian manufacturers must realize that the value you get in exports is 10x of what you get in the domestic market. And then therefore, they must do size and scale and penetrate global markets. And this is what my view is, that it's about making yourself globally competitive. Actually, under the Make in India initiative, if you look back, the whole focus was that India jumped up about 79 positions in the ease of doing business, only because of Make in India initiative. And by next year, we should be in top 50, and in 3 years' time, we should attempt to be in the top 25. We opened up a foreign direct investment regime. And actually, FDI in India has grown in the last 5 years by about 66%, as you know, whereas worldwide it has fallen by 13%. I mean, look at the mobile manufacturing sector. India was once a major importer of mobile phones, but under the aegis of Make in India, India has become a major manufacturer of mobile phones and has also started exporting mobile phones from the country. Similarly, you know, record amount of FDI has flown into India in the last few years due to FDI liberalizations done under the aegis of Make in India. So I think Atmanirbhar Bharat is not about anti-globalization or isolation. It's not about protectionism at all.
Okay, but but the Make in India initiative, yes, we have gone up in the ease of doing business quite a bit. But there's so many investments promised there by various other MNCs, other countries. They're yet to materialize, isn't it? I mean, it's yet to. I mean, those factories are yet to be set up. I mean, we are yet to actually make in India.
No, so this has to be a continuous process. In India, we focused largely on the services sector for a long while. We said that there will be no taxes on the services sector, there will be huge taxes on manufacturing. Look at what we did. We said we'll allow free electricity to the agriculture sector, but we'll charge at exorbitant rate from the industries. Similarly, we had very difficult labor laws. We allowed, so what has happened? We had high taxation on manufacturing. So we made ourselves uncompetitive in the manufacturing sector. It's only now that we've brought our tax level to the global levels, and we have a very competitive tax rate. And my view is that with this huge thrust now, you will see a huge. It's not that investments have not come in. Last 5 years, our FDI has really grown. This year, we've achieved a record $68 billion worth of FDI. So our FDI figures have continued to grow. We have to create the right climate of size and scale, and that is what the attempt is now. And this will have to be a continuous process over the next 4 to 5 years.
Mr. Kant, you also have a lot of experience in the tourism sector. I mean, from Kerala when you were doing work, and this God's own country is your idea, and how that state took off on the tourism map. It's one industry which is really badly hit in India right now. Of course, it's hit worldwide. What would you say? I mean, are there any plans that you have to make now India God's own country?
No, you see, COVID has impacted all sectors, but there are indeed some sectors which are badly hit as compared to others, and travel, tourism, and hospitality has been impacted badly. This has been impacted badly because travel was brought to a standstill. These are sectors which have massive untapped potential in India, and they have a huge multiplier effect in terms of providing jobs and pushing us on the path of economic recovery. Tourism has the potential to generate millions of jobs every year. This is very important for India given the current situation. But it's important to realize that it'll have to be the domestic tourism which will have to start first, and with the domestic tourism starting off, then we'll open up international tourism. I've been at the helm of both Incredible India and God's Own Country, which were able to bring together the potential, along with awareness, arousing the interest of entrepreneurs. It aroused the interest of domestic and foreign tourists. It propelled the state and government country machinery to work on boosting the growth in the travel and tourism sector. But tourism is essentially a private sector activity, and therefore, as we open up, our attempt has been to open up this sector as the COVID subsides. We'll open up. We've opened up our airlines. We'll open up more of regional connectivity. We have a lot of airports which still remain unutilized. We'll give a big thrust to air connectivity and railway connectivity. We are also taking the holistic island development plan for Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep Island, which has a huge potential to create jobs and boost the local economy. We will have to need a very focused, once COVID subsides, once we recover from COVID, we'll require a very focused, sustained campaigns to bring in to the forefront, all the key states which can be major drivers. And this can be a huge link them up with railways and aviation. But I think it'll have to wait a little while until the COVID subsides. But travel and tourism, I totally agree with you, can be a very major driver of growth. It has huge potential. It's an untapped area for India, and for many of the states of India, it can be a huge job creator for India.
Apart from the logistics of it, of being able to travel or not travel, etc., it's also a social issue, isn't it? Some other states, tourism states like Himachal, Uttarakhand, Goa, they may not like so many people to come into their states, and for the fear that they may spread the virus.
Yeah, so my belief always has been that actually India should not focus on mass tourism. India's got rich heritage, rich culture, very strong architecture, a great amount of archaeology, and therefore India's philosophy should be to focus on high value tourism. Our strategy post-COVID era should be to focus on high value tourists, which are able to give you a great amount of unit value realization. People who want to experience a destination, people who want to rediscover themselves, people who want to see a country as it is. But once the COVID subsides, there'll be a huge, let me tell you this, that tourism has seen its ups and downs, but once COVID subsides, there will be a huge impetus to travel. And we should gear ourselves, we should get ready to ensure that our destinations should become top class. Our infrastructure work around these destinations, the experience of creating an experience is the challenge. Storytelling about a destination is important, and that is critical, and that is what we must do. This COVID provides us the opportunity to do this, because 6 months down the line, when tourism opens up, it'll grow and expand in such a manner that we've never seen before. All these hotels that we are worried about will all boom and grow and expand.
Okay, and in the domestic tourism scene, the pilgrimage, I mean, that is also a huge component. Any sort of plans to make that more attractive, more sort of to have these SOPs in place?
Yeah, so Tourism Ministry has already put out SOPs. The key is masking. The key is about social distancing, and I'm a long-term believer that individuals will have to take care of themselves. I had recently written an article, and I had actually said this, that we actually need to ramp up our testing. Contact tracing has to be rigorous. We put out Arogya Setu app, which should be a very powerful tool in technology tracing, because at the end of the day, it's about testing, tracing, and contact tracing and isolation. And containment has to be very, very stringent. We also need a lot of community participation. Public adherence to wearing of masks and social distancing is key. Government can educate, but it's the individual who has to follow the discipline.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kant. It's been great talking to you. In fact, it's a very positive conversation actually. Where people are thinking many years of this kind of dread and doom. You are saying that it's actually only a matter of months. That's a very positive outcome.
No, firstly, two things: that this is a crisis moment, but every crisis is an opportunity. And we must look at areas where we'll grow and expand in the coming years. We quite often get into sunset areas of industries. It becomes very difficult to get into those areas. So we must look at getting into sunrise areas of industries. Secondly, this is an opportunity to set our own house in order, bring in all the reforms, radical reforms which we've never done before. Why do we not do size and scale? Why do we not have the same level of efficiency? Why do we have 16% of our logistic costs? This is the time to set all that right. God has given us this opportunity through this crisis. Set it right. You'll make yourself the most efficient manufacturer. Unfortunately, Atmanirbhar package has a number of very far-reaching reforms. I had never expected that in my lifetime we'll see agricultural reforms of this nature, which we've done by bringing in contract farming and doing away with agriculture produce marketing control order, or taking several things out of Essential Commodities Act. I had never envisaged. When I was in school, coal was nationalized. It has led to, despite the vast resources of coal, we import 25% of our coal. Can you believe it? We spend a huge fortune on importing coal, and it's taken India 50 years to chase this. A totally outdated, antiquated, socialist era coal nationalization to bring in commercial mining. It has taken us 20 years to change the definition of MSME. So this is an opportunity to push for all these radical reforms for which India was dying out for and crying out for.
Just one point on the coal mining issue. There are a lot of environmental concerns. If the mining is let out for private, entities, how would you address them? Would you also strengthen these laws?
No, I'm a strong believer in sustainability. I'm a strong believer in carrying capacity. I'm a strong believer that whatever economic activity we must do will be with strong controls. It must be supervised. It must be managed well. We must do economic development with sustainability. We should not repeat the mistakes which China has already done. We should ensure that we bring in the latest technology. We ensure environment sustainability. But you have the same challenge when you import coal. You have far greater, you are importing coal. So therefore, when you do it domestically, you should be able to manage it in a much better manner with far greater level of controls.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for joining the Outlier. I think, as you said, so this pandemic does have some positives. There are lessons to learn, and there are way to go forward. There are a whole lot of reforms to conduct.
Yeah, this is a huge opportunity. We must really seize this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining the Outlier.
Thank you. Thank you so much.